So this meeting, everyone, took place in Calgary in July 2023, this year, between Muslims and Justin Trudeau. Let's watch and react.
What are you, as leaders within our community, doing to protect our children? It's the huge conflict between that ideology and culture, our way of life, and our religion. And not just us, there are many communities within the Northeast here especially that are having those concerns. And they come to us. We've met with other leaders within the community and outside the community as well, and they have those concerns. But I believe they are legitimate concerns that we need to go back to the parents and tell them what's going on. I'll tell you what, we have no problems at all with the LGBT community. They can do whatever they do.
So this gentleman, he is a community leader, and I believe he's trying his best. May God reward him. And it's not always easy to address a person in power or politician, given, especially if you're in between a rock and a hard place. But let's listen closely to Justin Trudeau's reaction.
Whatever they wish, this is we're tolerant, but please, we don't have to accept that. What I mean by that is, I'm a Muslim. I accept who you are. It does not mean necessarily that I need to believe if that belief is right. I ask you, Mr. Prime Minister, please protect our belief, our culture as well, the same that you are doing for the rest. So this is where we're coming from. I know, and I've heard this concern.
So let's just summarize. The Muslim community leader is basically saying, give as much attention to religious rights as you would to, the LGBTQ community or narrative. And right away, Justin Trudeau, you'll see it kind of gets, I wouldn't say heated, but a little bit of combative, where I think Justin Trudeau becomes quite defensive. And I'm actually surprised by some of the points he tries to bring to the table. And I think this video is really important because it almost serves as a case study as to what the liberal philosophy or liberal ideology brings to the table when it comes to discussing these issues and how we can perhaps debunk them. And I'm not, obviously, by no means the best person to do this. I think there are many people, particularly in the Muslim community, who can help respond and address these issues. They're very well articulated, and they can articulate these issues and bring education and awareness, science, facts to them. But like I said, I'm really surprised to see Justin Trudeau's response, and I feel like it's a little bit cliche and almost outdated. So let's tune in.
Many times, and I know that it is a very real issue. First of all, there is an awful lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. People on social media, particularly fueled by the American right wing, are spreading a lot of untruths about what's actually in the provincial curriculum. Like, the federal government doesn't control what's taught in schools. That's the provincial government that controls what's taught in schools. So that's not something that is directly on the federal government. But at the same
So two interesting points. I don't know if you caught that. Right away, he says there's a lot of disinformation out there. There's a lot of misinformation and disinformation about there, half-truths being spread on the internet. And what he's talking about is the far right or conservative party or Americans that are trying to create wedges or leverage these issues and in favor of their talking points. But the reality is that, look, and I'm speaking as somebody who's neither liberal or conservative. I'm Muslim, first and foremost. What I will say is that, first of all, you have a history of both conservatives and liberals adopting the LGBT narrative and its beliefs, even though it's unscientific, unfounded, and goes against a lot of religious norms and just is counterproductive to society as a whole. Where does it end, right? Just see the alphabets keep on expanding and expanding. But what I was surprised, like I said, he's trying to use this as a political argument and saying that, and you'll see later on in this video, he gets more into it, where he really feels that it's coming from the far right. But I just feel like he's, and by the way, I didn't mean to pause here, but it is a kind of funny shot. But the thing is that it seems like he's not in tune with what's actually happening, first of all. And that's the liberal way, is just to double down, deny, and to take these letters and these alphabets and just to let them expand as far as possible. Like, where does it end, right? We might even have a point where we have people identifying as time-traveling cyborgs, right? And who knows what else, right? But the second part that was equally interesting is the fact that he's trying to he's shifting the blame. So there's a partial truth in that yes, a lot of the provincial government has a regulation over these things being taught in schools. But what about the federal government obviously has influence on these topics, from the way that stores and businesses and corporations and academia, culture, film itself, and obviously, it's just, my point here is that he doesn't want to outright admit it, but it's part of his ideology, and it's rooted in his ideology, which he will, I think, confess to later. So yeah, but it's just interesting how that, like I said, politics shifting the blame. It doesn't. I'm not saying he needs to take ownership, but at least admit that this is your beliefs. This is part of your beliefs, and the point is that these set of morals, like, there's no limits on them. It doesn't. Nobody knows where it starts, and nobody knows where it ends. It's quite interesting, and there's a lot more that I feel like is not being told here.
And the federal government is unequivocal about standing up for everyone's rights and freedoms.
So yeah, and another point, sure, there might be disinformation from one side, a little bit of disinformation, but there's equally or a ton of more disinformation coming from the liberal side. Again, I'm not a fan of neither political party or whatever, but I just think it's important, because in Islam we don't have this right wing versus left wing, really. We yes, we have scholars and thought leadership that might disagree and whatnot, but at the end of the day, there are limits to what a Muslim can believe and accept and whatnot and promote.
And the highest expression of parental rights is, of course, the safety and well-being of the child. Right? Your concern as a community is for the safety, the well-being, the strength and the protection for your children. I entirely understand that.
And right, he's choosing his words very carefully here. Strength and protection for your children, right? But nothing about what about religious identity? What about other identities? And now, obviously, it's not the federal government's job to get into that. I understand that. But you see, and this is where I think, okay, maybe Muslims and Christians and Jews and others, people of the book, we might have this more in common, where, first of all, there's no conflict with being religious and keeping God priority and God first in mind, and being a citizen of Canada or Canadian. There's no conflict in that, first of all. But what I think all this video also kind of exposes is that a person, whether they claim to be conservative or liberal or belonging to a particular party, they may, especially if they don't have any kind of connection to spirituality or God Almighty, then really, where does their morality and their values emanate from? And as we can see, right, in many countries around the world, in many cultures, morality just keeps on evolving and evolving and evolving. And it kind of goes along with whims and desires, and it doesn't start. And to the point where I've seen now liberals admitting this. They're kind of fed up and saying that this is ridiculous. This is kind of, gone on too far. But now a lot of liberal politicians like Trudeau are stuck between a rock and a hard place, because they need the vote between people who support this kind of ideology, even though that ideology isn't good for their dunya and akhirah, or their existence on earth, nor their afterlife. Let's continue.
The one thing that
is really, really important in Canada is that we're a place that stands up for everybody's rights. And certainly when it comes to the Muslim community, this government has, well, we were the government that pushed back against the conservatives that made a political campaign against the niqab, that brought in a snitch line against Muslims. The Islamophobia pushed by the previous conservative government in a whole bunch of different ways was something that we always stood against. Now this government has been and will always be the strongest ally to all minority communities, including particularly Muslims who have faced terrible violence. And when you look at the black Muslim women in Edmonton who are attacked, there is a run of Islamophobia we absolutely have to stand behind and stand against. The issue, though, is...
So just to pause there, look, I think to give a little bit of credit where credit is due, every political party or every politician has done some good. At the same time, a lot of politicians have blood on their hands. And for those who are watching, if you don't know, currently today, there are Palestinian children sitting in Israeli prisons. I'm going to say that again. I'm talking about just children sitting in prisons in Israel, right? The so-called claim-unquote democracy. The reason why I'm setting this example is because when it comes to supporting Israel, the Liberal Party and Conservative Party, there's really no difference. Even NDP now to some extent. And yeah, to be fair, okay, yeah, Justin Trudeau, at least from the Muslim community's perspective, he's done some good things, as like bringing in refugees. But remember that Trudeau and other politicians around the world will also sometimes help finance and fund and indirectly support wars that create refugees in the first place. So, I hope we see the irony there. On one hand, yes, you're pro-refugee, but you also created policies, international foreign policies, that allowed refugees to exist and people to be bombed and cities to be destroyed and people to be killed. So yeah, yes, you've done good things. Nobody's denying that. But you've also done not so good things. The conservatives here, yes, the conservatives were Islamophobic. I'll share one thing I've observed here in Canada. When the conservatives were in power, I actually noticed some positives in some sense, that at least the Muslims were more united. That's one thing that I saw. But I also saw, of course, that some Muslims were afraid, unfortunately. And in some sense, there were stronger ties between the Canadian government and supporting causes overseas that had nothing to do with protecting Canadian interests. Supporting wars overseas that had nothing to do with Canadian interests. So I couldn't understand why the Canadian government was getting involved in Iraq, Afghanistan, Israel, Libya, wherever it was. I couldn't understand, whether directly or indirectly, how does this help make Canada safer? So I couldn't understand. Anyways, let's continue.
The Charter of Rights and Freedoms that protects your religion, that gives you freedom of religion, that allows you to fully participate in the society, give you all protections, protects all minorities as well.
So I thought this was actually really a little bit condescending, and I thought that some of his comments in this video had like a racial undertone. There's a racist or racial undertone, whatever you want to say. There's a saying actually that some Muslims brought forward and recently addressing this issue in their talks and addressing it publicly, that the far right or right wing, whatever you want to call it. Again, I don't like to even box people, because I know people. I don't think the right is a monolith. I don't think the left is a monolith. But the far right, they don't like Muslims. So the speaker said the far right, the right wing, the conservatives, the Republicans, they don't like Muslims. But the liberals, the left wing, the far left, well, they don't like Islam. So yeah, the Republicans, the conservatives, they'll tell you, you Muslims, go back to where you came from. But the liberals, they'll be like, yeah, you Muslims, you come and live here. You come work here. You come contribute to this economy. But don't bring your Islam. right? And I thought that was pretty accurate. It's interesting. And here, it's like I felt like, I don't know, I can't say, I don't know if he was doing this intentionally or not, but maybe he's just programmed this way. But you don't think we understand Canada? You don't think we understand, like, you don't understand? Do you not understand how long Muslims have been living here? How long Muslims have been contributing? Probably longer than you have been alive. Uh, Muslims have been building Canada. Muslims have immigrated here since the early 1930s, I think, or 1940s, and maybe even before that. Um, so, so yeah,
And it's not a buffet. You can't pick the protections you want out of the charter and leave aside others. Standing up for people's rights means standing up for everybody's rights. Now, if you
this is a point you are going to hear again and again and again, that liberals will bring the liberal ideology, and again, the liberal ideology that is adopted by both conservatives and liberals as well. Okay, so let's just be clear. I'm not talking about the liberal party. I'm talking about liberal philosophy, liberal political philosophy, and liberal ideology. So he says here, it's not a buffet. You can't pick and choose. This is a very important point one needs to pay attention to. There was an Islamic scholar who was mentioning something like this, that, a lot of the times the student union in a university will approach Muslims on campus, like the Muslim Student Association, and they'll say, you know what, okay, you want this, you want that, right? Well, or you know what, you want to fight Islamophobia, you want to fight hatred against Muslims and Islam. Well, then you need to cooperate and collaborate with the LGBTQ community. And fundamentally, this is flawed. This is very problematic. So that's one angle, right? The other angle is that he's saying. So what I'm saying, just earlier point, is that it's not a good bargain for. First of all, it's not a good bargain for Muslims to sacrifice their identity for a little bit of gain, and at the end of the day, that gain is so short term. I mean, one thing I'll say, and I'm very happy to see this across North America, and I don't agree with everything Jordan Peterson does obviously. There's a lot of things I disagree with him on, but people like Jordan Peterson and his movement and a lot of people behind him, I mean, they pushed back quite hard on the LGBTQ narrative. They really challenged it in ways that I thought could never ever have been done. And I think that's a great thing. That's a great thing. Um, and this society supposedly is supposed to allow for that. Now, what Trudeau is saying, you have to really break this down. A couple things. He's saying, guys, it's not a buffet. You Muslims, really what he's saying, you Muslims or Christian parents or whatever, really, I think he's talking to the Muslim parents here in trying to convince us that, you know what, you guys want rights? You guys want freedoms? You guys want really the freedom to practice your religion, to teach your children? Well, you can't say anything about LGBTQ. Okay, first of all, this contradicts, and this, what they call the American First Amendment, or the right to free speech. This directly contradicts the right to free speech. So you're trying to take away our right to free speech now. And secondly, the two are not the same. It's completely apples and oranges. Like, imagine I say to someone, you know what? Again, this might be a poor example, but if I say, I'm going to go buy you a bag of apples from the grocery store, and I want you to, in return, just go buy me that car over there, that luxurious car. He's equating religious identity with this other identity, which has no scientific basis, which is very recent, very new, which is linked to sexual behavior, right? Which children, I think, at all levels, all psychologists should not be learning about just at any age. And we'll get into that later. But it's just this buffet example. I've heard this so many times. It is such a poor and weak argument. First of all, it's not a buffet. That's the first thing. It's not the same platter that you're picking and choosing from the table. The other thing, if you really want to, and if we entertain your argument for a moment, when was the last time you heard of students in Canada or North America being forced to or pressured to or encouraged to participate in Ramadan month, right? Usually what happens is Muslims are doing Ramadan or some Islamic festivity or religious practice, or let's say Friday prayer, Jummah, right? And a religious accommodation is being made for them. Not everyone's being forced to go there to participate. You know, you don't even have to acknowledge or respect. Like you just, it's just, it exists basically. It exists. And yeah, of course, in school sometimes, in religious classes, people are taught about religion. But being taught about religion and being taught about the LGBTQ narrative and sexuality is not the same thing. It's apples and oranges. They're worlds apart. It's two different things. So if you're going to use that example, then why don't you allow people to identify as different ages or different ethnicities, which you don't. That's not even part of, if I'm not mistaken, it's not even part of the narrative, right? Because it's supposedly a quote unquote sexual identity, right? And he's entertaining the LGBTQ thing as a minority, that also is problematic. Anyways, there's too much to be said. Let's just continue.
Look at the various curriculums, you'll see that there is not what is being.
Because yeah, is it a minority, or is it a lifestyle? Is it a sexuality? Is it a desire? Let's continue.
Said out there about aggressive teaching or conversion of kids to being LGBT. That is something that is being weaponized by people who are not doing it because of their interest in supporting the Muslim community. These are people on the far right who have consistently stood against Muslim rights in the Muslim community. But they are weaponizing the issue of LGBT, which is something that, yes, Islam has strong opinions.
He says Islam has strong opinions, but I'll come to that in a second. I think if you ask most Muslims around the country, most Muslims around the world, I've spoken to many Muslims, imams, they are actually happy at the little bit of collaboration that's occurred between Christians and Muslims at these protests or these campaigns and pushing back. They're actually happy. So that's one thing. I mean, if anybody's creating the wedge, it's Justin Trudeau right now, right? Because what he's saying is, no, don't trust these guys they're from the far right. You know, they used to hate you, and it's not like we haven't forgotten. But at the end of the day, what does the Qur'an say? The Qur'an talks about the people of the book, right? We can't remove that verse from the Qur'an. I'm sorry, Justin Trudeau, for you. We won't remove or change anything. But the Qur'an talks about the people of the book, the Christians and the Jews, and under Islamic law, Christians and Jews do have special rights. If you're new to Islam or still learning about it, you should know that Muslims do respect Christians and Jews. Yes, we do believe we're on the truth. Yes, there would be different roles or rights, perhaps in an ideal Islamic world or society. But at the end of the day, if you ask, let me just cut it clear, make it very clear. If you look at Christians living in an Islamic country, right, they are living it up. They're literally living it up. They're living a very comfortable life. And if you asked Muslims in Canada, hey, Muslims, would you want to live in a Christian country and be treated as a minority, just like the way an Islamic country would treat a Christian minority? They would say yes. They would say yes. That's how good. I know there's been a lot of propaganda around this. Unfortunately, that's another video, another topic. But yeah, it's just. I mean, I think not just a bridge is being created, but what we call dawah, invitation, for people to hopefully not just learn about Islam, but to really come into the mosques, break bread with us, ask questions, stop getting your information from quotes and whatnot, which I think that's one area maybe I'll just agree with Justin Trudeau, there has been a lot of misinformation about Islam and Muslims. Unfortunately, there's been misinformation about a lot of different faith groups and whatnot in mainstream media.
The same way that the religious right in Canada, the Christian right, has strong opinions against as well. They're using those fears to drive a wedge between...
Yeah, and I think he kind of contradicted himself because he just admitted, yeah, the Christian right, or I wouldn't say the Christian right, I would say just Christianity. Christianity is not pro-LGBTQ. I'm sorry, I don't know what version of Christianity you're following, sir. But yeah, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and many other faiths are opposed to the LGBTQ ideology and culture. And I'm not, by the way, and just like I would not want my Christians colleagues to compromise on their faith, bend the Bible, twist it around. I'm not one of those people who says, "Kumbaya, let's all join hands with the Christians and Jews, and we're all the same, pray behind each other." No. Yes, we can be friends, yet, or acquaintances, or work together in some areas. And this is one of them, I think, for sure. Nobody wants to see children being taken advantage of, or the moral decay of our society. So I really think that it's very important that that Justin here needs to be at least acknowledged. It's not just the Christian right. This is mainstream Christianity we're talking about, and this is mainstream Islam that we're talking about. And we'll see that he really is a diehard liberal on the inside.
A government that will always...
a diehard liberal that believes in the reformation, probably, of religion, and doesn't really understand how to interpret text, how to hold true to text, because and this is the thing why liberalism is failing, is because it's always evolving, it's always changing. The standards are never there. It doesn't hold families together, it doesn't hold couples together, it doesn't raise strong children, it doesn't raise strong leaders. Liberalism is failing on so many levels, and that's why people are coming back to religion. So it's not just the far right Christian groups. No, it's mainstream Islam and mainstream Christianity.
Stand up for all your rights, just like I will always stand up for the rights of LGBT kids, including if they're LGBT Muslim kids. And
that comment was very troubling. Here I felt he's trying to play a Muslim theologian. So one needs to look at the arrogance, the overconfidence. Are you talking about, when you say Muslim LGBT kids, are you talking about a group of people who struggle with a particular desire, and but they still want to retain their Islam and their Muslim identity? Is that what you're talking about? Because if that's what you're talking about, then that would be left for imams to counsel those children or those youth or those people. But lo and behold, your government last year banned conversion therapy. If you don't know what conversion therapy, if you don't know what this bill I'm talking about is, it is shocking that it was passing in Canada, because, like I said, where's the free speech now, right? Can't criticize Israel much, can't criticize LGBTQ much, can't do this, can't do that. Like I said, this is very problematic. Or when he says LGBT Muslim kids, is he talking about kids that are being fed, influenced, brainwashed, essentially indoctrinated in schools about this kind of stuff? That, again, is baseless, has no science behind it. They did a study. I mean, this will go back and forth a lot, but just recently, there was a mini documentary, I can't remember what it was, and there was a few articles and research papers talking about how baseless the LGBTQ research is. Right? They did a study recently where two twins, one of them was saying that they were homosexual, the other one was not. So it's very much a matter of choice. This is not like, yes, someone can struggle maybe with that particular desire, but born with, there's no such thing as a gay gene. There's no such thing as a gay gene whatsoever. Or thirdly, is he talking about somebody who, when he says LGBT Muslim kids, is he talking about a youth or adult who says they want nothing to do with Islam and not want to now adopt the LGBTQ narrative? I mean, really, you can remove the word kids from there, because what his intention here is protecting the rights of LGBTQ Muslims. That's really what he's talking about. right? He's just using the words kids here conveniently because to kind of soften people's hearts, and they're just kids and they just want to identify as rabbits and this and that. And
standing up for everyone's rights is what you get with the liberal government.
So yeah, I think Christians would have a problem, as big of a problem if you said Christian LGBTQ. I mean, like I said, you need to be. I think he should have. I don't think he should mention religion because now he's trying to play into the hands of theology. Uh, are there Muslims out there and Christians out there and Jews out there who struggle with same sex desires and whatnot, and this are confused or have doubts about these kinds of things? Yes, absolutely. And the Muslim community is always here to address these things. But like I said, if I mean, this is the weird thing, right? You can technically speaking, a child can convert to LGBTQ, but once they convert, they can't come back, they can't revert back to being straight, right? Because of this conversion ban bill. How ironic is that? Um, and yet, Muslims, I guess, are criticized when we say someone can become Muslim, but when you become Muslim, you should stay Muslim and not really think about reverting back. I mean, to any other faith. But of course, obviously, in Canada, people have that free will and freedom to do so. Anyways, let's continue.
We're going to defend your rights, even when you disagree with us defending other people's rights. And how we work to get along as a country and listen to each other and prevent people from activating baseless fears around lies and around, as you said, scaring your parents into what's actually being taught. That is hurting the fabric of respect and openness that allows Canada to be one of the places where we support and defend the Muslim community more than just about any other Western country in the world.
And we appreciate that very much, Mr. Prime Minister. But probably a perfect example is what we saw in one of the elementary schools, when one of the teachers, she's threatened and she's those kids, you are not a Canadian and you should leave Canada because you did commit in pride.
And what happened to that teacher?
So if you're not familiar with what the Muslim brother here is talking about, he's referring to an incident that occurred in an Alberta school. I think it was near Edmonton, Canada. And she was recorded saying that because some Muslims had chosen to not participate in pride, quote unquote, pride activities, Pride Week activities, and they were reprimanded, they were ostracized, and then she made all these ridiculous claims and everything from ad hominem to just irrational bunch of logical fallacy after logical fallacy. And again, it was borderline racist. And I think one of the great things is that kudos to a lot of the citizens in Canada. Again, I sent that article and that to some of the imams here as well. They were very pleased with the comments. The comments were actually defending the Muslim children, and that's something very, very positive to see.
Whatever you want to say, just tell them how you feel.
Spanish, and nobody knows about that.
That teacher got serious consequences because that is not something that is acceptable.
This is what we need the government to come up.
But you know what the funny thing is? What that teacher was saying and what Justin Trudeau is saying now, there's really not that much difference. She literally said almost verbatim some of the same things that Justin Trudeau is saying. It's not a buffet. If you want your rights, you need to defend and participate or protect LGBTQ rights. I mean, the right to protest, right? I mean, we Western countries pride themselves off of the right to protest. So why? So I guess I'm trying to ask the liberals or conservatives or anybody who believes strongly in LGBTQ rights culture, the whole narrative. Can Christians, Muslims, and others, can we protest? Can we protest against this? That there should not be a pride flag in stores, that this should not be taught in any school, that this should not be in corporations and businesses. that this should not be in mainstream media. Like, why does a gay cartoon or a gay character need to be in every single movie? Let me just tell you an actual story. Story. I'm sitting there. I'm sitting there with my nieces and nephews, and they're watching a cartoon, and these kids are like under 10 years old, right? And it's a cartoon. I can't remember what cartoon it was. I'm pretty sure it was Disney. They're watching one of their movies, and it was two gays as a gay character, and my nephew, like I said, he's like under 10 years old. He's like, why are they kissing, or why are they going on a date? And I think the other one's either laughing or he's just not understanding. Why would you teach 10-year-olds this stuff? I mean, this is, by the way, this isn't far-fetched. I think what happens in school is probably far worse, right? With the books and that they're introducing. And just like, remember at the end of the day, a good portion of teachers, depending on who your children's teacher is, they will adopt that belief. And I remember your teacher will always influence your students, no matter what. If they're a math teacher, they'll influence your kids. Science teacher, they'll influence your kids. The English teacher, influence your kids. They could be a gym teacher, influence your kids. They could have nothing to do with LGBTQ in the curriculum, but they'll influence your kids. And whatever views they hold, beliefs they hold, that will be at some point, influential to your children, right? Even if they see or hear something subconsciously or indirectly. So, yeah, one could argue, maybe the best way is to homeschool, and that's another whole topic. But homeschooling seems to be the best way to go these days for a lot of people. And I've heard a lot of Christians do this. A lot of Christians homeschool now. A lot of Muslims homeschool, and it's proven to be a very, very effective method. But again, our tax dollars go to these public schools. Okay, they go to the military. They go to a lot of causes that citizens never asked for. I mean, it's set up. Things are set up this way in a very propagandistic way, where it's like, okay, you know what? We're here to protect the citizens. We're working in your favor, in your interests, but not always. Not always. We're following somebody's ideology, right? And this is why it's so important that people have education, especially when it comes to religious identity and Islamic education.
I say we do not support that. We did not accept that.
That is the federal government doesn't control what happens to teachers in the provincial system.
Yeah, but you have commented on many other situations, right? And that was an Islamophobic, quote-unquote Islamophobic situation. But I think the reason probably why a judgment call was made is to not comment on this is because, they probably agree. There was probably some dispute inside the Liberal Party. Anyways, I don't want to be too assumptive. Let's just continue watching.
It does not represent my position or the federal government's position that people need to be chastised for their religious beliefs. People are free to have their religious beliefs. But within all that, we have to make sure we are standing up and defending everyone's.
Again, so this is where the conflict is that, okay, somebody has a religious belief, but then you bring them to the public school system, and in addition to learning, math, science, English, all these somewhat neutral topics, but then you're indoctrinating them with things that not only go against their religious belief, but supposedly you want them to change their sexual orientation and the way they view the way they view the fluidity of gender and identifying as different things, pronouns, what have you. I mean, this whole thing, just like I said, there's no end to it. Who knows what kind of pronouns we'll have in the next 10, 20 years.
Rights within the community. That includes the right to be who you are and to love whom you love. And that.
Yeah, love whom you love. And there was this is interesting. Love whom you love. So many people have brought great points with this. Love whom you love, or I forgot what their again, this video is going on way too long. But basically, yeah, love is love, right? They say love is love. Okay, love is love. Okay. if love is truly love, and I'm sure many of you have heard this argument before, so do we allow incest? If a father loves his son, in that way, sexually, or is attracted to their daughter sexually, do we allow that? The answer is obviously no. Polygamy. Do you allow Islamic polygamy? The answer is obviously no. And by the way, for Christians who are listening, and I've actually heard Christians actually defend Islamic polygamy, and I was very impressed. Just think about this now. In Islamic law, and by the way, if I'm not mistaken, I think biblical law is somewhat similar. They have this similar values or culture. Imagine a man, when we could take Abraham, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, as an example. But imagine a modern day Muslim man wants to take care of two wives financially. And we know sometimes a wife, their husband dies. Sometimes the community's small and, she's not comfortable with someone else marrying a stranger or whatever, or flying across across the world. So many times I've seen it. I'm not saying that polygamy is for everybody. That's not what I'm saying. But I've heard and seen it work. I've seen positive examples, both in history and even modern day examples, where it actually is favorable. It actually works, and the women agree to it. Think about this. They're taken care of financially. They don't have to work. The children, the stepchildren, are taken care of. That woman's needs are all their needs are taken care of. Emotional, physical, you name it. That man doesn't have to go around cheating or fornicating or committing adultery. So there's so many benefits, and the fact that any country would outlaw it, it does. While saying, open relationships are fine, swinging's fine, this kind of relationship is fine, that kind of relationship is fine. There's even if you really want to get disgusting, there's even NAMBLA, which is a group of men and others that are trying to legalize pedophilia, which is absolutely disgusting and horrendous. So yeah, liberalism has no end. At least, what religious? If we don't understand the value and benefit of religion, it grounds us. It grounds us, and there's reasons for that, which I won't get into. But it grounds us because it is connect. It comes from God Almighty, right? It's connected to God Almighty's. God Almighty made and created us and knows what's best for us. I hope and I pray Justin understands this one day.
I know your parents' generation might have a little more uncertainty about that.